Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay. So, good evening, friends. So, please be comfortable, and I'll offer reflection for your consideration tonight, and you can take from it whatever you would like. And it's merely for your consideration. But I think tonight I'll be talking about something which I'm fairly confident everybody has experience with. And that is a matter of the role of family in our practice. And even if somebody isn't a Buddhist per se, or isn't doing what we would consider a formal spiritual practice, any human being is trying to get better at living with the other human beings around them. The only difference is how they're going about that. So say this is a spiritual practice we all kind of share. Just trying not to suffer around our family. And that's something we have in common. And it's actually it's wonderful to reflect on that, because first I address an elephant in the room, and that's that if one takes a very doctrinal study of the Buddha's teachings, they don't find so much about the role of being a layperson or having a family or how to relate to mother or children. I mean, there's a little bit in there, but I mean, it sounds like the path is about, going to the woods and meditating and getting enlightened and bright lights and that sort of thing. The nitty gritty of like not getting angry at the people you're living with, it seems to kind of be set to the side. But this is just, it's part of what it means to build a religion that gets passed down through the ages. So the doctrine, what we keep recycling in the talks and in the books and all of that, that wasn't written, it was chosen. So the Buddha taught for 45 years. That's an incredible wealth of teachings. And after he passed away, a group of monks, very austere, very serious monks, got together. And it was the monks who were very interested in keeping the Buddha's teachings alive through the generations that got together and chose which teachings to emphasize. And you'll see this in the Pali Canon, in the recollection of the records we have of the Buddha's teachings. Often the teachings start with somebody showing up in front of the Buddha, and it says they made small talk. And it's like, a lot of people have asked, like, wait, no, what were they talking about? But we don't know. It's just kind of abbreviated. They made small talk, and then the important teaching happened. But if we were to actually be able to go in a time machine and go back to those interactions, we'd find that probably the small talk was about people's lives, was about their families, their husband, their wife, their children, their parents. That this is the stuff of practice. And anybody who has even taken the first step of deciding to think about spiritual practice has probably realized that it's going to involve changing the way they interact with the people in their immediate inner environment. And so it almost necessitates learning to better understand family. And the Buddha himself, this is not coming out of nowhere. It's not that the Buddha was enlightened and he would just sit and meditate. And it's us who are considerably less enlightened. We're the ones who have to have to figure out, how to not be angry at our siblings, how to not resent our parents, how to not try to control our children. If we were like the Buddha, we wouldn't have these problems. But if one reads between the lines as well, the Buddha was very much a family man. In the 10 paramis, the perfections of character that it said the Buddha had to perfect before he became a Buddha, the very last one involved an act of generosity where he had to be able to let go of his family, who were being taken to be servants. He had to be able to let them go. That was the hardest thing for him to do. The very last perfection of character was to let go of his own family. And in his final life, the life where he actually became the Buddha, the last people he went to see before he left the palace on the night of his great renunciation was he went to look in on his wife and his son. Those were the last people. And he couldn't even, it said, approach them. He just peeked in from the doorway because he knew if he went up and got close to them, he wouldn't be able to leave the palace. Even as committed as he was to enlightenment, the bond was so strong. But he did leave the palace. He did go seek enlightenment. And that's kind of what we tend to remember, is that when we do spiritual practice, we're working on ourselves. He had to be willing to let go of his family. But in his first attempts at meditation, he practiced what was considered to be the most effective meditation of the age, from some of the most esteemed meditation teachers. And the reason he knew that these weren't enlightened beings was when he left those meditation attainments, when he came back to regular consciousness, the first thoughts that came to him were thoughts of his wife and his son. He realized that the meditation wasn't cutting what he called the strongest of bonds. So the Buddha said, you wouldn't say that a bond made of rope or wood or even iron is a strong bond compared to the bond of family. And you think about that, rope would last maybe a decade, wood twice that, iron could last 50 years. But the bonds that we form in relationship and family last our entire lifetime, can easily last a century. So the Buddha said, these are the real bonds that we should pay attention to, the ones that are really strong. And he said this from experience. But the Buddha is very interesting, even though he found personal enlightenment. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a way to get past attachment. He, after he attained enlightenment, he returned home. He was all about family. He was all about community. He was actually, he cared very deeply about his country, and he worked to reform it. And he ordained his former wife. He ordained his son. He ordained many of his friends and cousins. If getting beyond attachment meant that we didn't care, he wouldn't have taken that step. But I like to think that actually through our practice, we begin to realize what it is to really appreciate our family. And that's what the Buddha found, is that when he was freed of all attachments and all resentments, what he found was gratitude and appreciation for these people that he had grown up with. And so we're not seeking to remove these bonds of family, but we're working to understand them and purify them. And that's sort of what I've been reflecting on today. And it started with going to visit a friend, and she was just talking about what it's like to be a parent. And I know some of you listening online are young, so you're only working with this in the other direction. But there are also parents who will hear this talk, and know immediately what it's like to suffer over expectations. Yeah. And my friend actually brought up Khalil Gibran, and there's a wonderful poem in his book, The Prophet, on children. And the prophet in this book is trying to encourage the people of a town to develop this enlightened approach towards their children, which is a way you can kind of begin to think about all of our family relationships. He said, your children are not your children. They are the children of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not yours. You can seek to be like them, but you should not try to make them like you. Life doesn't move backwards or tarry with yesterday. And this is what my friend was talking about this morning. And I thought about it. And this is a universal experience we have. It's a joke I've heard much with the online group, as everybody seems to have heard, is I think it's quoted from Ram Dass. He said, if you ever think you're enlightened, go back and visit your family. They'll set you straight. And that's what it's like to, if you become a parent, you realize you're forming this bond with this person, and it's kind of messy. It almost feels like you can't get it right. There's attachment there, and there's expectation. You try to do your best for them, but the odd thing about it is the best thing you can do for them is to let them go. And that's a principle of family that applies even to like a romantic relationship, or to our parents, or to our siblings. No matter what direction you're looking in, the relationship, if it's pure, is going to be the same. We can know that we have a relationship with somebody, and it's family. It's one that we were born into. And yet that relationship has to be able to evolve. The person has to be able to change. And this is the essential understanding in the Buddha's teaching, is that things are impermanent. And it's an interesting reflection that from the day you were born, there is a relationship formed between you and the people in your family, and that will endure for your entire life. And it's not there. These are real relationships. The relationship of a child to their parent is one of gratitude and a form of death. The parent literally gives everything to the child. And so that it's a debt that can't be repaid by normal means. The Buddha said you could carry your parents on your back for 100 years with their excrement, trickling down your back, and take care of them for a whole century. You would never be able to repay them, because everything that you did still would have originated from them, from their original act of giving birth to you, and of taking care of you when you couldn't even move your wormy little limbs. You couldn't roll over. They took care of you. That's how dependent you were on them. And I think this is, it's not quite the same for a parent to the child. We think about it. My friend said they knew somebody who said children are incidental. And anybody I know who has children would just cringe at that. They're like, who the heck would say that? If you've gone through the process of raising a child, you've shed a lot of tears through the process. There's been difficulty, but it's been one of the most important and transformational experiences. So it wasn't incidental, but I think what they were probably trying to get at is that children can come and go. And that's more the relationship of the parent to the children. The parent has many children, but the child only has at most two parents. And so these relationships are kind of, we're born into them, but what gives them their real power is not that convention. That's more, it's more like genetic, it's just, we're just born into a family. And yeah, we have siblings. Yeah, we have parents, but what gives it its real power is understanding a deeper need that we have. And so I think of this in the relationship of the parent to the child. Even though the parent is going to have many children, there is something that gets conveyed in that helplessness of the child. It's not just all the work that goes into giving birth to a child. It's but there's something that happens at that moment when the child is completely dependent on the parent, that is very powerful for the parent, and fulfills some deep need for love, in the receiving sense. And this is how we can come to think of it, is why it's so powerful. You think why these bonds are said to be so strong. The parent will die for their child. Yeah. Why would they do that? If they can just have more children, why would they form such a bond? But the ability to take care of somebody actually means something to us. It shapes us. It changes us. And when people experience that, there's somebody who looks up to them, who trusts them, who needs them. It often overrides all of their other paradigms and prerogatives. Just like this person needs me, and so that bond becomes cemented in place by just the power of how good it feels to let go of ourselves, to let go of our ego and do something for another person, to put ourselves aside and look out for somebody other than ourselves. And that's why these bonds are so enduring, is because no matter what direction they're happening in, there is something there that we're surrendering to, that you don't necessarily see in a community at large. So you're born into a family and you've immediately got these connections, but because these connections were something you didn't get to choose, you have to allow them and accept them and kind of grow with them. So that acceptance and that renunciation makes them valuable. I think about my relationship to my sisters, for instance. We're very different people, and we live in different places. We see each other a few times a year, and there's a bond there, even though there shouldn't be. We're not that much alike. We haven't even spent a lot of time together if you were to go and keep track of things. And yet we have shared experiences and a shared point of origin. And it's that commonality that means that they will always be my sisters, because the past is already done, is already set. And so our families, in a way, they give us this opportunity to just see the cycles of life and practice acceptance. Now, we can be good or bad at that, and sometimes it can be really hard. So, like in a community, we can choose to leave, but you can't necessarily choose to leave your family. I mean, you can just get away from them. You can refuse to talk to them for the rest of your life, but they will still be the same people. You will still have that same fixed point of origin. And so if we're going to do family well, then we have to kind of lean in to that, letting go of the self, but also allowing for change and growth. And this is where I think Gibran's words about letting go and not trying to fix people into our expectations can really resonate with any sort of family bond. And so, yeah, we begin spiritual practice and we try to get better, but do we want our family to get better too? Yeah. And actually, many times we have expectations and hopes for our family members, for our children, our siblings, our parents, that even we don't fulfill. You're like, oh, I want them to be a better person than me. And that's interesting. Like Gibran's words, you can choose to be like them, but try not to make them like you. I think we get that. I think we really we don't want to repeat patterns. We don't want to we don't want people to go through to have the same weaknesses that we do, that we've come to know in ourselves. And so we want better for them, but it's not really up to us. And this is the letting go that we practice. But I've often quoted, I think it was the teacher Ajahn Sumedho. He was once asked, somebody came up to him and said, I've started practicing the Dhamma, and I'm so worried about my family. They're not very virtuous people, and they're very deluded. And it's like, well, we all kind of say that, don't we? But he's like, what is the best thing I can do for them? How can I help them see? And Ajahn Sumedho said, the best thing you can do for your family is not create them. And this is one could say the Buddhist approach to a strong family dynamic is to not create the people, even though there is this bond, even though there is this connection, the person is changing. And can we see them? Can we appreciate them? Can we come to like the fact that they are outside of our control and they don't match our expectations? And that is a very different, but also a very much more interesting way of being with other human beings. To say, how would you do something, or who do you want to be? And all of this, I say, having been practicing for some number of years, I say this, and I think it probably resonates with a lot of people, because if I can point to any part of my life, any aspect of my life that has changed the most or most visibly, it's my relationship with my family from the time I started practicing. And it's kind of surprising to me, because I actually had a pretty decent childhood. I'm one of those people. I know some days it feels like we're pretty rare. It's like, no, I like my parents. No, I'm okay with my sisters. I don't want to live with them, but I'm okay with them. But it's very interesting. Even though we didn't have any problems, there also wasn't a lot of connection or appreciation. There was just a kind of indifference. Like we literally all gone in our own directions. Like we had grown up together, but then we're like, yeah, I want to go move here, and I want to go do this, and I want to go do that. And I think this is the American way. It's like everybody's seen what their parents did. And they think, well, that didn't work for them. I'll do something different. And we all kind of split up. But when I began practicing, I noticed there were these there was suddenly more space in my heart and more time in my day to consider what were the things that shaped me. When I first started sitting down on the meditation cushion and saw what my mind was doing, it was round and round and round, I began asking the question of why is it doing that? And the deeper I looked, the more I realized it was because of my impression of myself and the voices in my head and the judgments I had for myself. And I started to listen to these and inquire into these. And I realized that these voices weren't my own. You know, these were the voices of my parents and my siblings and my friends growing up. You know, when I was born, there was no voice in my head. You know, how could there be? Along the way, I heard things and they stuck. They had imprints on me. And coming to understand the ways that the life I was leading had been shaped by the people around me, there was this turning point where appreciation started to arise. You know, at first, I think many of us are, when we're introduced to loving kindness practice, and we're told that we've got to start with loving kindness for ourselves, it's the hardest thing. Do we actually like ourselves? But for many people, there's this way that it gets locked up with their feeling towards their parents, towards the people they grew up with, and this is because of that imprint. We are built of, you know, pieces of other people, and when we look at these pieces, the largest amount of these pieces are going to be our family members. You know, they're the ones who taught us. They're the ones who exemplified different patterns. And some of those we took on because they seemed like good ideas. And some of them we took on because we didn't know any better. But we did. We took them on. And so coming to learn to have love and kindness for myself was also at the same time kind of loosening up my relationship with my family. And this is something I can say in terms of developing our spiritual practice. This is one of the first places we can look and we just ask ourselves, how do I feel about my parents? How do I feel about myself? And just let that land. Like, if these are people who helped us when we had nothing, when we couldn't take care of ourselves, do we harbor any resentment? Is there any unwillingness to accept some of the things that might have said and done after that, when we were old enough to start doing some accounting and being like, you didn't do this for me, and you didn't give me this, and you never said this. I know, I like psychiatry is like a really big business in this country, but it was very interesting when I started to do spiritual practice. I started to meditate. The need for psychiatry started to disappear. There's the moment that you accept that the people you grew up with were as imperfect as you are. There's no more resentment. They're just going through it just like you. They tried their best, maybe, and whatever happened was what happened, and that's family. It's like, you didn't choose to be with them. It's like getting dropped onto an island with a bunch of random people. And this is the cosmology in Buddhism. Samsara is that we are reborn. The mind, the karmic patterns are reborn, and so these bonds that are stronger than you know, rope or wood or steel can survive. And so we just go round and round, kind of interacting with the same people because of these associations that we have. We want something from them, or they want something from us. We go round and round, and this time they're our parents, but the next time they may be our children. And if we take on that cosmological approach, then it doesn't really matter what place they're in. And you say they weren't a very good parent, but then it turns back around and they're your children. And you're like, well, if it's the same essential mind, then all of their patterns would be in a different context. And you say the reason you resent them for being a bad parent, if they were your child, would you resent them in the same way? Like they're as a parent, they were very irresponsible. They never showed love. Well, if they were your child, would you hold that in the same way? Or if they were your sister, would you be like, you're very irresponsible. You never say you love me. I don't think I've ever critiqued my sister. It's like you can go up to them and it's like, I was talking with my psychiatrist the other day and you never told me you loved me. I don't care. She's who she is. But that's the thing. Like if the relationship, if in one particular station, we wouldn't take that to be such a big deal, well, then why do we in the other stations? If we really take on this idea of the circular patterns and the way that we keep seeking out these connections with people, well, all of that becomes irrelevant. They are who they are and they've got their stuff, and we are who we are and we've got our stuff. And so over the years, I say it's been very interesting because I've developed a spiritual practice, and there have been plenty of times when I've wanted to give back to my parents out of gratitude, to give to my sisters, to help them with the struggles of raising families and being in the world. And the best thing it seems I can do for them is to be really clear about what it is I want to do, and to do what's best for me, and to just share that. So, and it's hard to put that in words necessarily, but we all see it along the way. Is we can't really force anybody to do anything. Now, this is the lesson a parent gets over and over and over again. You've just got to see them grow up and grow into all of their imperfections and take them on and take responsibility for them. And you can't help them out at all, except to be there when they fall over and kind of help them up and dust them off and be like, told you that was going to happen. And then just walk away and be like, yeah, but I couldn't do anything about it. But this is the thing, is if we really look, when we're in the role of the child, we didn't want our parents to do everything for us, or to tell us how everything was going to be. So if the role is reversed, why would it be any different? What we really thrive on in family dynamics is when somebody is just really clear about what makes them happy and they pursue it wholeheartedly, because then we know how to support them. We know who they are. We know what they like. We know what to get them for Christmas. It can be as simple as that. And this is something we will find along the way while we meditate. If we really want to, we really start to feel that gratitude and we want to give back, well, then just keep doing what makes us happy. And it was interesting. I had a period about a year ago where I was not in robes. After being in the monastic order for 10 years, I had to step back to take care of my health. And I got to see what it was like before I became a monk and I had a kind of lukewarm relationship with my family. But then while I was a monk, it was very curious that the more I let go of my family and be like, I'm going to do what works best for me. I'm sorry, I'm letting go of these bonds. I might not be there to support you in your old age, mom and dad, or I might not be there for all the birthdays and Thanksgivings and Christmases. It seemed the more that I let them go, the more they liked me. The more they could relax when I came to visit, because they knew I would come to visit without any agenda. And that when I stepped back from the monastic order, I got to see over that year that I was away, that they were very confused about me. And the way that they had kind of been relaxed around me got more complicated. Like they didn't quite know what it was I was doing, because they knew how much spiritual practice was important to me. And I wasn't apparently doing that at the time. And so they help get me shirts or buy me a cell phone, or, offer what support they could. But basically, I became just another person out in the world. And it's hard, because a lot of people are seeking happiness, but out in the world, we don't really know where to seek it. And this is what's different when we begin to do a spiritual practice, is we become really clear about where happiness is. Happiness is letting go of the things that cause us to suffer. It's a 1-to-1 ratio there. We're intrinsically happy. We're just covering it up with all of the mess of our attachments and delusions and all of that. If we can clear that out, then we like ourselves, we like others, we're happy. And so coming back to the monastic order, it was just like we had developed this relationship where I accepted whatever they did and they accepted whatever I did. So when I was leaving the monastic order, they kind of looked at me and they're like, is that what you really want to do? And I think, well, I think it's really what I got to do. And like, okay. And I was going back to be a monk. They looked at me and they're like, is that what you really want to do? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And so here we are. It's like, I couldn't do any one thing to bring them along in my spiritual practice. And yet through letting go of them, I have. And this is just an echo of the Buddha's own story. If we're willing to look into it and dive into it and read between the lines, is that he had to completely let his family go. He had such a strong love for these people, because in the cosmology, he had been going round and round with these people for many, many lifetimes, strengthening these relationships. And yet at the end, he had to let them go. But when he let them go, he really discovered who it was they were, who it was he was, and what he was doing. And that allowed him to come back in a way that, well, yeah, his ex-wife was a little annoyed. she kind of let him have it for a little while, but she got over it. She got better and she got enlightened. It all happily ever after, yeah. So these are just some reflections and thoughts for something I think probably everybody has been noticing. Like families are going to be where a lot of the practice is happening, and maybe I offer these thoughts, and this encouragement is like you can find it to be a very ripe field for growth, and that the growth, if you're doing it right, it won't be what you expect. But it'll be of great benefit, and that though we are letting go of our families, we may actually find along the way that we get closer to them, through doing this. So I offer this thought for your reflection this evening. Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu.
sadhu.